This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York. There's been another fatal shooting by an ICE agent. Tuesday in Houston, an ICE agent reportedly shot and killed Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, a Mexican citizen, during a routine traffic stop. A spokesman for ICE said the officer fired the shot after Araujo refused to obey orders and then weaponized his vehicle, attempting to drive into the ICE agent. We've heard that story countless times. ICE identified Araujo as, quote, an illegal alien, but the victim's son said his father had lived in the United States working construction for more than 30 years. The district attorney for Harris County, where the incident took place, launched an investigation separate from the one led by the Department of Homeland Security and its Inspector General. But yesterday, that DA said the federal government was preventing him from finding out what exactly happened. This is consistent with the Hennepin County DA's complaint after the shootings in Minnesota of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, when the FBI blocked state and local law enforcement from investigating those two murders. According to The Trace, that's a nonprofit news organization that tracks gun violence in America, there have been 11 ICE shootings so far this year, 3 of them fatal. On May 18th, 2 Minnesota agents were charged in the shooting of a 52-year-old Venezuelan who was legally in the United States. His name was Alfredo Alejandro El Horno. He was a delivery man with DoorDash. He survived a shooting in the leg after ICE agent Christian Castro allegedly stood outside the man's home and fired his service revolver through the door. Castro, the ICE agent, was charged by the Hennepin County DA with 4 counts of second-degree assault, as well as falsely reporting a crime. Castro, along with another ICE agent, they are both accused of lying when they called the shooting self-defense, when they claimed that Venezuelan man and his roommate were beating the 2 ICE agents with shovels and a broom. Surveillance video later revealed no such incident. It just showed Castro, the ICE agent, standing outside the victim's home and firing his gun into the door. Luckily, that victim was not killed. In April, Minnesota ICE agent Greg Morgan was arrested and charged with 2 counts of second-degree assault after a driver near the I-35 West interchange in and around Minneapolis called 911, not 911, 911, called 911 to report someone pointing a Glock at them. That allegedly took place back in February. The driver reportedly was sitting in heavy traffic. He noticed an unmarked black expedition vehicle with Utah plates coming up along the left service lane, attempting to cut ahead of everybody in the traffic jam. So this driver pulled in to the service lane to block that vehicle. And later, as traffic subsided, that unmarked vehicle carrying the plainclothes ICE agent, that vehicle pulled up alongside the driver, and then the plainclothes ICE agent in an unmarked vehicle allegedly pointed his Glock at this civilian. And according to reports, that ICE agent later admitted, yeah, I pointed the Glock at him and I yelled, "Police, stop," because after that driver blocked the shoulder of the road, making it impossible for me to get ahead of the traffic, I feared for my life. Reports say that ICE agent was not responding to a call, didn't have to be anywhere important. He was merely on his way back to ICE headquarters in downtown Minneapolis. Hennepin County District Attorney Mary Moriarty said this was one of 17 other illegal use of force incidents by ICE and Border Patrol officers this year, and she is investigating all of them. And while she complains that the federal government is acting as a hindrance, her office is still investigating the shooting deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. There is a difference between the federal government prosecuting these agents, which is never going to happen, and a local DA, which probably won't happen. If any of these ICE agents are convicted for murder or criminal assault, if any of them somehow get convicted in a federal courtroom for these crimes, Trump will pardon those officers. And we know this Justice Department is never, ever going to prosecute anyone who works for ICE or Border Patrol. It is the job of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division to investigate and then prosecute both federal and local law enforcement officials after they've killed someone and it seems suspect. When we think of civil rights, we think of protected classes of people like blacks, Hispanics, women, or members of the LGBT community. But the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division isn't only there for them. It's there to enforce the rights of all civilians, even white men like Alex Preddy or white women like Renee Good. When an ICE agent allegedly discharges his weapon several times into a car window, and then as the victim lies dying in a pool of her own blood, and he mutters, "You effing bitch," that is the job of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department to investigate that officer. Instead, this Justice Department immediately launched an investigation into the victim's wife to determine if she was part of any conspiracy to interfere with ICE. After Renee Good was shot, the Justice Department didn't investigate the shooter, allegedly Jonathan Ross, who allegedly called Renee Good an effing bitch. Instead, the Justice Department launched an investigation into Renee Good's wife. So there are not going to be any prosecutions of any federal agents enforcing this administration's immigration policy. Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller has falsely told ICE and border agents they have what he calls blanket immunity under the law for anything they do. And that is patently, manifestly wrong. What these ICE and Border Patrol officers have is a Justice Department that refuses to enforce the laws, thereby providing these agents with de facto immunity. It's de facto blanket immunity for as long as Donald Trump is in charge. Now, there's no immunity from state and local prosecution. But here's where it gets tricky. It's very hard for a local district attorney or a state attorney general to bring charges against federal law enforcement agents for something those law enforcement agents did while performing their job. The Supreme Court has been somewhat clear on this. They say the Constitution's Supremacy Clause demands that a federal agent can't be arrested by local law enforcement if he or she or they are enforcing laws and or orders derived from the federal government. The Supremacy Clause, federal laws take precedence over any state and local laws. For example, during the Civil Rights Movement, when FBI agents were dispatched down south to investigate a lynching, local sheriffs were not allowed to hinder them. And according to the court, so long as a federal officer is acting under what they call the color of the law, attempting to perform their duty in a, quote, necessary and proper fashion, then local law enforcement lacks any jurisdiction. So, according to the Supreme Court, if the Hennepin County DA can somehow prove that Jonathan Ross wasn't acting under the color of law when he allegedly shot Renee Good, and if the Moriarty, the DA, can prove he didn't perform his duty in a necessary and proper fashion, then the Supreme Court would rule, okay, you can try him in a local jurisdiction like Hennepin County. A lot of gray areas there, and it's very subjective. Theoretically, an ICE or border agent could be prosecuted when you can prove the crime they committed was not under the color of their job, or if it was under the color of their job, but their behavior wasn't necessary or proper. I don't know if I said that right. Well, if an ICE agent or Border Patrol officer, like the one who allegedly shot Renee Good, or how many guys killed, shot to death, executed Alex Preddy, if they are prosecuted in a state or county court in Minnesota and they are convicted, presidential pardons do not extend there. Donald Trump cannot pardon those ICE agents if they're convicted in a Minnesota state or local court. Now, when and if they're ever tried in Hennepin County or down in Harris County in Texas, that ICE agent, if a local district attorney prosecutes, theoretically, federal agents being prosecuted could petition a federal judge and ask that this judge take the case away from a state and county judge and hold the trial inside a federal instead of a state courtroom. But the local district attorney or state attorney who brought the indictment would still try the case, which would still be about the application of state, not federal law, meaning if the ICE agent were convicted in a federal courtroom, Trump's pardon would still be meaningless. By the way, nothing would please Donald Trump more than having his own private police force funded by the government. He would love it if ICE were like Blackwater, mercenaries instead of being government employees. He would like it that instead of working for the government, he had police officers working for subcontractors paid by the government. That's how the for-profit prison system works. Immigrants, for example, are not held in federal jails. Mostly, they're not, or city jails. They're held temporarily. The goal is for them to be held in private for-profit jails run by Geo Group or Core Civic. They're the largest, and they're publicly traded corporations who answer to shareholders, not the government. The government just gives these corporations our money to perform government services. They perform those jobs for more money and with way worse results. They have to turn a profit, so it's going to suck. Now, government contractors are not immune from state and local prosecution. The courts have repeatedly said the Supremacy Clause offers no blanket immunity from state and local laws for federal contractors, including mercenary law enforcement agents. You can sue a federal contractor, and a state or local DA can also bring charges against a federal somebody who's working for a subcontractor who's not officially a law enforcement officer, instead kind of like a private security guard. You can sue them. There have been, for example, massive protests outside Delaney Hall. That's a for-profit detention center in Newark, New Jersey. It's run by Geo Group. Geo Group gets $1 billion from our government. It's a 10-year contract, $1 billion from our government to run this detention center. And because it's for-profit, conditions inside are horrendous. In May of 2025, New Jersey Democrat Congresswoman Monica McIver tried to inspect this facility, and she was later indicted by Alina Habba, who was the New Jersey attorney at the time. Remember that genius? Monica McIver, McIver was trying to inspect this facility, and she was indicted on 3 counts of assaulting, resisting, and impeding federal officers who try to keep her from entering Delaney Hall to inspect it. The officer she reportedly brushed up against required no medical attention. It was a DHS, a Department of Homeland Security officer, but if you just touch a Homeland Security official, they shatter like a Fabergé egg, and it's considered assault. You're not allowed to touch them or feed them, I think. Her trial, Congresswoman McIver's trial, right now is on hold as we await her appeal before the Third Circuit Court. We're hoping it gets thrown out. On June 21st of this year, there was a Father's Day vigil outside Delaney Hall. That's the for-profit ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey, run by Geo Group. They have a 10-year, $1 billion contract to run this concentration camp. That is what these are, concentration camps. Students, rabbis, professors of genocide and ethnic cleansing have all said these for-profit detention centers are concentration camps. Hitler didn't invent the concentration camp. They first started using them during the Boer War, and we used them in the Philippines. These are concentration camps. So there was a Father's Day vigil outside Delaney Hall. This was June 21st, 2 weeks ago? And a female protester waving an upside-down American flag was struck by a red Dodge Challenger driven by an employee of this for-profit jail, Delaney Hall. It's always a she who gets attacked by these men. She required medical attention and was taken to the hospital suffering a head injury. The driver who allegedly ran her over was an employee of Delaney Hall. So the Department of Homeland Security, even though he was not a ICE agent, he was a guard, or what, we don't know what he did inside Delaney Hall, but Homeland Security immediately came to the driver's defense. They said the protester who was hit was part of a riot. She wasn't. The Homeland Security said she blocked the vehicle and the driver felt threatened. They accused her of interfering with law enforcement, and they say that's a federal crime. Well, the only problem is that employee, while you call him law enforcement, he's not federal law enforcement. He was an employee of Geo Group, meaning he enjoys none of the immunities from state and local law enforcement that an ICE or border agent does. And so Newark police arrested this employee and charged him with assault and issued a traffic ticket. Too bad Newark police didn't arrest him and put him in Delaney Hall. They put him in a Newark jail instead of Delaney Hall. But that would have been cruel and unusual punishment if they put him where he works. His first court date is scheduled for August 5th. He's also being sued by the woman he allegedly ran over. So, I should mention, immigrants, documented or undocumented, are, as I keep telling you, are all documented. Okay? Immigrants are all documented, and they enjoy the same access to our civil courts as citizens do. An immigrant, documented, undocumented, can sue in our civil courts, which means they can sue the private contractors who run Delaney Hall. They can also sue the individual guards inside those for-profit detention centers. The guards in for-profit detention centers do not enjoy qualified immunity because they are not federal employees. They work for Geo Group. And the Supreme Court has been very specific on this. The Supreme Court has ruled that government contractors who serve in law enforcement positions, no qualified immunity. There have been some recent rulings this year and last where the Supreme Court said detainees of for-profit jails can only sue the guards, the contractors, or the jail in state or local civil courts, not federal. So I don't know why there aren't enough immigration lawyers, because we should be flooding the zone with lawsuits. I'm sure we are, but we don't have enough graduates of law school protecting immigrants because most lawyers are POSs. Most. I think there's one I know that isn't. Two. Definitely two. Bruce Fein and Ralph Nader come to mind. And then I can't think of any other lawyers who aren't POSs. I'm sure I can think of one if you give me time. So you should be, if you're a lawyer, you should quit your effing job because you hate it and start suing Geo Group and Core Civic on behalf of the detainees. But you got to do it in state and local court. The Supreme Court won't hear it. Okay. Will we ever see an ICE agent prosecuted in a federal courtroom? No, not until AOC is president. There's some interesting cases, though, of ICE agents who are being prosecuted by the federal government and state and local, because in order to work for ICE, you have to be a garbage human being, especially now. Now, I used to call ICE agents garbage human beings 5 years ago, and I would get letters of complaint. Oh, my abusive brother-in-law is an ICE agent, and he always apologizes after he beats my sister, so I don't know. That's not nice, and no more. We know who ICE agents are, and you're a garbage person if you work for ICE. Fact, only the worst of the worst work for ICE. And there's a problem because they commit crimes on the job, which is very difficult to prosecute, but because they're garbage people, because ICE attracts only garbage people, you have to be a garbage, a piece of human excrement to work for ICE. So a lot of these people are prone to criminal behavior. I would say probably all of them. And that criminal behavior on the job and off the job, and if they commit that criminal behavior while not performing their function as an ICE person of garbage, then they get arrested, federal and state. Take the case of Samuel Saxon. He's a field office supervisor in Cincinnati, or he was. He had been with ICE for nearly 20 years. In December of last year, he was arrested for attempting to strangle his girlfriend, who, and this is really important, was not in America with the proper documentation. Okay? He was arrested by Cincinnati police. He's now sitting in a federal jail after pleading guilty this April to making false statements. So there's a lot going on in this case. There's an Ohio State investigation into this ICE agent's long history of domestic violence with city police who reportedly were called out to his home nearly 24 times over a 2-year period. In the last, before he was arrested, Cincinnati police allegedly, reportedly came to his home 24 times over a 2-year period. Now, this guy, who is now sitting in a federal prison and facing other charges, is a field office supervisor for ICE. He's been there for 20 years. In other words, he can sign an administrative warrant to search your home, accusing you of harboring undocumented immigrants. I'm going to get to administrative and judicial warrants later. Administrative warrants are not signed by judges, no matter how much Jim Jordan and Mike Johnson lie. They're signed by anybody in ICE in a position of authority, like this field office supervisor who was arrested for attempting to strangle his girlfriend, who was not in America with proper documentation. Do you see the type of person who allegedly gravitates to ICE? You're rounding up people without documentation, but you're in a long-term relationship, allegedly, with a girlfriend who doesn't have documentation. Hypothetically, what kind of man is that? What does he need in a relationship, hypothetically, theoretically, to perform as a man? Think about this. Having the type of people who want power over another human's body. You're an ICE agent, and your girlfriend is not in this country with proper documentation. That should tell you everything about the garbage drawn to ICE. Okay, so clearly Donald Trump, his DOJ, Department of Justice, is never going to prosecute anything or anyone. But with this guy, so far, they're staying away from this. They're not claiming the Supremacy Clause protects his right to allegedly choke his girlfriend. So any crimes this guy may or may not have committed, they were not committed, allegedly, while performing his job as an ICE agent. He was specifically assigned for removal, ERO, removal of undocumented immigrants from this country. Personally, I think just doing that for a living is a crime, but none of his alleged activities fall under the color of the law. None of his alleged crimes, wasn't performing any lawful job. So it's unlikely his lawyers can claim the supremacy clause as he goes through state and local courtrooms, which he's going to do. There's another Minnesota ICE agent who was arrested this year attempting to meet a 17-year-old girl who turned out to be part of an undercover sting operation. Apparently, the DOJ, ICE, Department of Homeland Security, is not coming to his defense. Okay. There's another ICE agent who was arrested this year after he allegedly crashed his car and then passed out drunk while carrying a government-issued firearm. Nothing is preventing state and local from prosecuting. There was that clearly intoxicated ICE agent in Florida who got pulled over by state troopers. He was arrested for drunk driving with his 2 small children in the back seat. You might remember the dash cam video from that where this drunk ICE agent demanded to know if one of the arresting officers was Haitian just because he happened to be black. The drunk ICE agent was asked, what does it matter if he's Haitian? And he said, it matters a lot, and was menacing the black officer. That agent was sentenced to probation and community service. He's still working for ICE. From what we understand, he's on administrative leave, but has not been fired from ICE. Because why would ICE ever fire an agent caught on tape hurling racial epithets? That's a badge of honor, not grounds for dismissal. Give the man a raise. So I doubt we will ever see anytime soon this Justice Department fighting local district attorneys when they can fight them. You can't defend somebody who is off duty picking up 17-year-old girls. And again, maybe under a Democratic president's Justice Department, we might see ICE agents prosecuted by our civil rights divisions, but presidents of all stripes tread carefully when it comes to prosecuting federal law enforcement officers because they don't want to appear weak when it comes to law and order, and presidents are afraid of rank-and-file law enforcement in general. They can be dangerous. You have to appease them. What we do know is Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent who allegedly shot Renee Good and then allegedly muttered underneath his breath, effing bitch, we know he took 3 days off. He took 3 days off for administrative leave after the killing, and now he's back on the job. We also know, and this is very important, disturbing, and it gets to where we're heading unless we win back one of the chambers inside Congress. So Jonathan Ross, right? Everybody, his name was on video. Everybody saw it. Everybody learned his name. We also know 2 agents with the Department of Homeland Security, ICE agents, entered a polling precinct in Syracuse, New York, during the June 23rd primaries. This would be 2 weeks ago. These 2 ICE agents confronted an elections inspector, accusing her of doxing Jonathan Ross, the man who allegedly killed, the ICE agent who allegedly killed Renee Good. They accused this elections inspector of doxing Jonathan Ross by taking to Instagram, sharing a photograph of Ross that she found from the news coverage of Renee Good's death, and then added the caption, quote, I think today is a great day for Jonathan to be indicted! Exclamation mark. She didn't even have to write his last name. She didn't say, I think today is a great day for Jonathan Ross to be indicted. She didn't have to write his last name because by then everyone on Instagram knew the face. They knew who Jonathan was. But these two ICE agents on primary day, June 23rd in Syracuse, New York, these two ICE agents handed this elections inspector some kind of document from ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility. Yes, I'm as shocked as you are. I didn't even know ICE had an Office of Professional Responsibility, but apparently they do. And the document was an official notice that this election supervisor in Syracuse, New York, had violated federal laws that prohibit threats against federal officers. This official-looking document also demanded this elections inspector delete her post from Instagram. Now is a good day to indict Jonathan with a picture of him. So this was a document signed by somebody from ICE ordering her to delete an Instagram post that she made on January 8th. This was now June 23rd? Well, this happened in New York State, and our State Attorney General, Letitia James, has launched an investigation into these two ICE agents. Some very important issues at play here. Very important. First, is it legal to post a photo of an ICE agent on Instagram after he becomes a public figure accused of shooting to death a civilian? Is it against the law to take a photograph of an ICE agent who is part of the conversation and then writing, now is a nice day to indict him? Okay? Is that doxing? Is that doxing? Telling people what they already know? That the first name was Jonathan, no address, just now's a good day to indict Jonathan. Is that threatening or intimidating a federal employee? According to the official-looking document that these two ICE agents were carrying, yes, and you must delete that post. I'm going to get to administrative warrants in a second, okay? But these are the people who sign administrative warrants to search your home. Why did two ICE agents step foot inside a polling precinct during last month's New York primaries? And who from their field office thought this was a good idea, especially when there are palpable fears ICE will be stationed outside polling precincts come November 3rd to intimidate voters during the midterms? Who thought that was a good idea? Letitia James is going to try to find out, but good luck. And this is where it's really important. Who from ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility signed the notice ordering a United States citizen to delete an Instagram post, falsely accusing that citizen of violating federal law for merely calling for the indictment of Jonathan? Not Jonathan Ross, Jonathan. At a time when the entire world already knew who he was and what he looked like. Who is that ICE administrator? who signed this document, because this gets to the crux of the showdown between Democrats and Republicans this year over the funding of ICE. We forget there was a big government shutdown and then a partial shutdown because of ICE. And one of the big issues was administrative versus judicial warrants, that the Department of Homeland Security told ICE agents they only needed administrative warrants, not judicial warrants, to kick down someone's door to make an arrest or pull them out of a car. Right here is an example of why administrative warrants are unconstitutional. I want you to think of these two ICE agents showing up at a polling precinct on June 24th and intimidating a U.S. citizen, an elections inspector, putting in front of her what looked like an official document signed by an ICE administrator who can also sign administrative warrants. This document ordered a U.S. citizen to delete a post on Instagram. The Department of Homeland Security has decided ICE and border agents don't need to go before a judge and get a warrant to enter someone's home. That would be a judicial warrant. According to the Department of Homeland Security, all they need is an administrative warrant. An administrative warrant sounds official. It just means that it's been signed by an administrator, not a judge. It's been signed by one of the pieces of shit who works over at ICE. What is an administrator? Well, read the statute. There are about 30 classifications for an administrator in the Department of Homeland Security. 30 types of jobs can sign an administrative warrant. A field office director, like the guy in Cincinnati who's sitting in a jail charged with attempting to strangle his girlfriend, who is not an American citizen. Somebody who's a special agent can sign it. A chief patrol agent. Anyone in a supervisory or managerial position. So it's not just Greg Bovino. It's 10 levels down his chain of command. For example, these are the people who can sign an official document, an administrative warrant, to kick open your door. So it's Greg Bovino, 10 levels down his chain of command. You might see, for example, two ICE douchebags in an unmarked vehicle. One of those douchebags is training the other douchebag, which means the guy doing the training of that other douchebag, that douchebag is authorized to sign an administrative search warrant, which authorizes a team of ICE and border douchebags to kick open your door. And that's what the partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security this year was all about. It's what the government shutdown before that was all about. Democrats demanded 4 things. Now, I'm very critical of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, but they were right, and they did the best they could. They were demanding 4 things. Body cams on all ICE agents. Take off the masks. have your badges clearly identifiable at all times, and no administrative warrants to kick open doors or pull people out of a car. You need to go before a judge. You know, like it says in the Bill of Rights. Again, to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries' credit, they wouldn't budge on this. Mostly because it polled very well. You know, the American people have said they don't like ICE. They don't want to live in a police state. And if we're going to live in a police state, we certainly don't want to have to be subject to the whims of the half men who work for ICE. The Republican talking point on administrative warrants is a lie, as is all their talking points. Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and Speaker Mike Johnson, they keep saying administrative warrants are perfectly constitutional because they're signed by immigration judges. That's what they claim. They say, yeah, it's not, an immigration judge is not a traditional magistrate who is part of the judicial branch. Yes, immigration judges work inside the executive branch for the Department of Justice, but they maintain there's really no difference between an immigration judge working for the Justice Department and a judge housed inside the judiciary branch. Well, if that were true, yeah, I'd be okay with it. But it's a lie. It's a lie. Administrative warrants are not signed by immigration judges. Never, ever is an administrative warrant signed by an immigration judge or even anybody who knows how to read. They are signed by any douchebag inside the Department of Homeland Security with a managerial or supervisory position. Supervisory position. It's not a judge, not a lawyer, not even someone who can read or write, some douchebag, some half man who works for ICE. Now, remember those two agents who showed up at the polling station on, what was it, June 23rd or June 24th? When did I forgot, when did New York have its primaries? It was, let's say, June 23rd. What, 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. Remember those two ICE agents flashing this official-looking order from the ICE Department of Professional Responsibility, ordering that woman to delete her Instagram post and accusing her she broke the law and could be arrested? Well, that woman was a local elections inspector. They picked the wrong girl. You know, the ICE agents love intimidating women, but this one knew her rights. But, what about immigrants? And again, there's no such thing as undocumented immigrants, okay? Nobody in this country lacks documentation. The people accosted by ICE are in the system, there's paperwork, and they are awaiting their immigration hearing. Or they've just had their immigration status revoked by our racist president. They're not undocumented. I'm going to come back to this in a second. The Supreme Court just gave Donald Trump permission to revoke temporary protected legal status for 1.3 million people of color. This was last month. So 350,000 Haitian immigrants in this country with temporary protected legal status, revoked. That's why you're seeing this massive surge of ICE arrests because of the Supreme Court's ruling last month. Now, all those people have documentation, including a piece of paper that says they have temporary protected legal status. But Trump, because the Supreme Court last month just ruled, he gets to decide that these black people have to go based on the fact that they're black. This is racial animus. This is the most racist Supreme Court in modern history. This is pure racial animus, especially since Donald Trump is granting protected legal status and asylum to white Afrikaners from South Africa based on the lie that their farms are being taken by the black government. He's welcoming white Afrikaners from South Africa. They get to stay because Trump wants more white people here. He has said so. And the Supreme Court needed to take that into consideration when they ruled on Trump's ability to revoke temporary protected legal status for 1.3 million people of color. It's what you say in the lead up to the enforcement of the law. A lot of people think, whoa, it doesn't matter what you say. The Supreme Court is trying to establish intent, mens rea, I believe is what it's called. Lower courts overturned the Muslim ban because of what Trump said before he signed it. What you say matters. So, immigrants are being rounded up right now, and they're not undocumented. And most importantly, they have no criminal record. No criminal record. Their only crime is not being white. And Trump, because of this, Supreme Court gets to decide who stays and who goes. There's a lot of power last month that the Supreme Court authorized for one single racist to wield. Again, think of those two ICE agents who showed up at that polling precinct in Syracuse, New York last month. Imagine these two douchebags, instead of presenting some official-looking document to a woman who's an election supervisor, who's a U.S. citizen and knows her rights, imagine those two ICE agents instead presenting to a frightened immigrant in order to, I don't know, delete an Instagram post or take off your clothes and drop to your knees, or else. It is the ICE agents who lack the proper documentation, not the immigrant. These papers, these administrative warrants, they lack the proper documentation. The problem in America is we have a Supreme Court that has ruled that so long as Trump is president, those two ICE agents can get away with anything. Get away with anything. And the Supreme Court has paved the way for this. You cannot have authoritarian regimes without laws making, everything Hitler did was legal under German law. They wrote laws, judges upheld those laws. Hitler wasn't breaking any laws. You cannot have authoritarian regimes with half men who are willing to enable fascism, and then people down the food chain, the douchebags who work for ICE, who crave bodily power over someone else. Remember earlier I talked about an ICE field officer in Cincinnati who was arrested for trying to strangle his girlfriend, allegedly, who didn't have citizenship, allegedly, and it was established allegedly that she was not legal. This guy, allegedly, his job in Cincinnati with ICE was to remove illegal immigrants, but he's keeping one for himself, allegedly, supposedly, from what I've read. This is the type that gravitates to ICE, craving bodily power over someone. Henry Kissinger famously said, "Power is the ultimate aphrodisiac." Well, that says more about Henry Kissinger than it does about sex, aphrodisiacs, and power. Only a war criminal would say power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Henry Kissinger, who thankfully is no longer with us, is a war criminal. There's got to be something wrong with your penis, your sexual desire, if you think power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. And because it's Dr. Henry Kissinger, who's rotting in hell right now, everybody says, well, he's right. He must be right. Power is an aphrodisiac. If you think power is an aphrodisiac, there's something wrong with your penis. And because was something wrong with Henry Kissinger's penis, he overthrew Allende, committed war crimes in Cambodia, North Vietnam, Indonesia, to name just a few. Something seriously wrong with Henry Kissinger. And I think he has a son who worked for Conan O'Brien, I think. His name is David Kissinger, who tried to rehabilitate his father's image. So David Kissinger is a piece of shit. David Kissinger is a piece of shit for not changing his last name and trying to work. He succeeded in Hollywood with the Kissinger name. Henry Kissinger said, power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Who would share a bed with that sloth, Henry Kissinger? People want power over women. Men want power over, or other men. It's an aphrodisiac. No, you're very sick in the penis. Your helmet, the helmet of your penis, needs to see a psychiatrist. And this is why the midterms are so important. Because right now, ICE has sweeping power over anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, thanks to Trump, as well as a Supreme Court allowing him last month to revoke temporary protected legal status for anyone he hates because of their color. And don't forget the Kavanaugh stops, which grants ICE and Border Patrol officers license to pull over anyone, anywhere, based on their accent, complexion, and type of work. That's a Kavanaugh stop. That's what they call them. Thanks to Trump, the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, I am telling you, and this is a fact, we are a police state if you're not an American citizen. That is a fact. That is a fact. This is a police state if you are not an American citizen. If you're thinking of coming to America as a tourist, take note. You are visiting a police state for everyone who is not a U.S. citizen. And thanks to one big, beautiful bill, we now have 22,000 ICE agents. Trump doubled the number of ICE agents in fewer than 2 years. And the plan is to double it again by 2028 when he supposedly leaves office. Thanks to one big, beautiful bill, ICE has $45 billion to throw at the private prison industry to begin building mega centers that can house 10,000 detainees each. They are in the process of trying to convert old warehouses, no windows. They're trying to convert old warehouses into detention facilities, which means by the time the 2028 presidential elections roll around, the number of prisoners held in these for-profit ICE detention facilities will have gone from under 50,000, fewer than 50,000 when Joe Biden left office, to possibly 200,000. 200,000. And remember, these are for-profit detention facilities. I think they get $175 per bed. So those have to be filled. And remember Tom Homan? He's now, what is he? Is he still the border czar? He's got some job inside the White House. You know that bag of cash that he took right before the 2024 election? Allegedly, it was from people in the private security business who were asking for contracts from a future Trump administration. This was an ongoing investigation that Kash Patel, once he became FBI director, ended. But there are reportedly tapes of Tom Homan accepting a bag of cash from someone trying to land a government contract in the private surveillance detention of immigrants industry if Donald Trump returns to the Oval Office. So they're going to get it up to 200,000. It's in Stephen Miller's best interest. It's in Tom Homan, because they're not going to be working for the government forever. They're going to want their payback. And most likely it's going to come from Geo Group and CoreCivic. So if Democrats don't win either the Senate or the House this November, I can assure you we will have 200,000 people held inside those for-profit detention facilities by 2028. And then we all know it's a police state. Again, not necessarily for U.S. citizens, but by definition, that is a police state for anyone visiting or living here. If you're here without citizenship, this is a police state. So people experience history differently. This country is different if you're a citizen. And if you're a citizen, it's different if you're white than it is if you're black. Right? One of my daughters taught me, check your privilege. It's a term. It's a woke term. If you're a white heterosexual male, check your privilege. Say, whoa, my view of this country, my experience, my anecdotal evidence is a lot different than a black man in this country. Check your privilege. So, yeah, one man right now, Donald Trump, gets to decide who can stay and who can go, who can be targeted by ICE and who can't be, so long as he controls all the levers of power in our government. All it takes is one chamber, the Senate or the House, and he can be stopped. And we can claw back the money in one big, beautiful bill that's going to the for-profit detention centers. All right. Thanks to several laws dating back to the Red Scare in the 1950s, our Secretary of State has a lot of power. I think it's called the McCarran Act. There's several laws in the early 50s during the Red Scare that gives the Secretary of State, who happens to be Marco Rubio, power to kick pretty much anyone out of America who Trump doesn't want here, so long as they're not U.S. citizens. If Charlie Chaplin was pretty much kicked out of here, he knew to leave. If you're a documented immigrant, if you're here legally as a student, a professor, H-1B visa engineer, doctor, healthcare worker, you are at the mercy of Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, who has the unitary power to throw you out of our country based on your politics, based on what you're thinking. Not even what you say, based on your politics. He can throw you out and is throwing people out based on what they believe, what they're thinking. People are committing thought crimes now. These are not criminals who they're throwing out. Now they're throwing out immigrants guilty of what Donald Trump labels a thought crime. Now, if you have money and you're not a citizen, you get to challenge that in the courts, but they're flooding the zone. And there aren't enough judges or attorneys. So what does ICE do? They hold these people in the for-profit detention facilities until the system decides what they're going to do with these immigrants. A lot of money for the prisons as these non-citizens wait for some kind of judgment from sometimes an immigration judge, sometimes a regular judge. Depends. One big, beautiful bill, which was passed a year ago on July 4th, it was signed into law on July 4th, that was, think of it as a supplemental. So you have your annual budget. One big, beautiful bill was on top of what we spend annually. And one big, beautiful bill, a lot of money going towards border enforcement. It also capped the number of immigration judges at 800. Why would you do that? Why would you have a statutory cap of immigration judges where it's illegal to hire more than 800 immigration judges? We right now have 700 immigration judges. The average wait an immigrant has to go before an immigration judge is about 3 years. I don't know, there are 4 million immigrants waiting to go before an immigration judge? We need more immigration judges to process these people, let them into the country, and get them to where they're needed, because there's a population implosion, and without these people, who's going to keep Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and this Ponzi scheme we call an economy running? You need more people. Can't governments, countries die when they have negative population growth and they're right at the border. You just need more immigration judges vetting them and getting them to the cities that are going broke because they don't have enough workers. Okay, one big, beautiful bill caps immigration judges at 800. We need 4 times that amount. We're going from 50,000 people in ICE detention facilities to 200,000 by 2028 if Congress can't claw back the funding from one big, beautiful bill. And the only way to claw back that funding is to elect either a Democratic House of Representatives or a Democratic senator. And we're tripling the number of ICE agents. So a lot of supply on the enforcement side. And despite an extra $170 billion being spent on border enforcement, that's just from one big, beautiful bill. Again, that's a supplemental. There's what border enforcement agents get each year from our annual budget. And then on top of that, because of one big, beautiful bill, they're getting an additional $170 billion more to do border enforcement. And all that money is going to ICE agents or to for-profit ICE detention facilities, and none of it for immigration judges. As I said, in one big, beautiful bill, there is a statutory cap of 800. No justice. They don't want justice. They want the jails, the prisons filled. That's what they want. Immigration judges cut into the profits and they perform oversight. What do you mean there's no running water at Delaney Hall? What do you mean it's one meal a day? They don't want immigration judges. That's why they capped it at 800. No justice, no money for justice. And that is how you create a police state. Methodically. It's been less than 2 years. Project 2025. They know what they're doing. It's how you create a police state. First, the immigrants. Then, the undesirables who happen to be U.S. citizens. Now, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, can throw out any immigrant, or he can toss any immigrant into prison just because our Secretary of State, in the service of our racist president, doesn't approve of their political beliefs. Now you're thinking, well, surely that hasn't happened yet. It's happens all the time. In October of last year, Marco Rubio banned Colombian President Gustavo Petro from entering this country after Gustavo Petro complained to the UN that our country's airstrikes against alleged narco-terrorists are killing innocent fishermen from his country. Can't have Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia, allowed in this country. And then, of course, Donald Trump threatened to do to Petro what he did to Nicolas Maduro. Okay, here's where it gets really bad. This is where it gets really bad. Last month, our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, ordered the deportation of Beto Corral, a progressive activist from Colombia, living legally in the United States, guilty of no crime other than a thought crime. Rubio put into writing that Beto Corral's left-wing views undermined American foreign policy interests. See, there was an election in Colombia on June 21st, and Donald Trump supported a conservative businessman who ended up barely winning. It was a very close election. Beto Corral supported the opponent, who was a progressive lawmaker. And Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, said Beto Corral's speech and writing here in the United States his speech and writing in support of that progressive lawmaker who ended up losing the election by just 1 percentage point, Marco Rubio said that speech, that writing, undermined American foreign policy. And so Corral was arrested by the Department of Homeland Security late last month, and he's being held inside an ICE detention center in central Louisiana. In about 2 weeks, he's been moved 6 times from ICE detention facility to ICE detention. That's their method. They want to make it logistically impossible for the detainee to speak to family and a lawyer. And we think he's about to get thrown out of the country, even though, and you know, personally, I'd rather be thrown out of the country than forced to stay at the ICE detention center in Louisiana. He committed no crime. His name is Beto Corral. No crime other than using his First Amendment rights. And immigrants, citizens and non-citizens, have First Amendment rights. He was arrested for using his First Amendment rights inside the United States by supporting a progressive presidential candidate running in Colombia, a candidate Donald Trump did not want to win. And he was arrested. Look it up. That's a police state for immigrants. That's a police state. We are immigrants can commit thought crimes. They always could. They were deporting communists since before World War I. They were sending them back to Russia, even if they didn't live there. So you literally have a man, a left-wing progressive activist, being held inside an ICE detention facility right now because he disagreed with Donald Trump's policies. Okay, what about U.S. citizens? How do you make it so U.S. citizens can be arrested for their political beliefs? How do you make it legal? You know, that's how Hitler didn't break any German laws. You passed the laws first, the Enabling Act, to enable Hitler. Well, this is not original thinking, okay? They know what they're doing. You have to link a certain belief system to terrorism. If you can label, say, the people who oppose Donald Trump, if you can call them Antifa, and then designate Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, then you're authorizing the entire federal domestic law enforcement apparatus to spy on, intimidate, and detain anybody who espouses beliefs that are similar to what's believed by Antifa, which doesn't exist. Anti-fascist. Once Antifa is designated a terrorist organization, any speech in support of what Antifa believes can be legally construed as speech suborning attacks against our government because it's a terrorist organization. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did. It's in September of last year, he signed an executive order designating Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. That wasn't for cosmetic reasons. It wasn't for political reasons. Well, the end of politics was for legal reasons. Doesn't matter that Antifa doesn't exist. the FBI now has license to spy on, intimidate, harass, and arrest anyone they have reason to believe belongs to this non-existent organization. It's a lot of power. You don't have to put somebody on trial. We learned that the way the FBI dealt with Martin Luther King and Fred Hampton, quite frankly. Any U.S. citizen who, just like Beto Corral, that progressive activist from Colombia, who's sitting right now inside an ICE detention facility, any U.S. citizen now who holds political beliefs contrary to those held by Donald Trump, well, you can be accused of being part of Antifa. And that means you're subject to questioning, detention. A lot can happen if you're associated with a domestic terrorist organization. There's a lot at the FBI's disposal that doesn't require judges and juries. So, that's who Bill Maher accepted his Mark Twain Prize from Donald Trump. That's what Netflix is going to put on their channel. Bill Maher accepting a Mark Twain Prize from Donald Trump. Now, I went over the Mark Twain Prize on the last show. A lot of people told me, I didn't know Donald Trump awards the Mark Twain Prize. Of course he does. He runs the Kennedy Center. Who runs the Mark Twain Prize? The Kennedy Center. That's who Bill Maher crossed basically a picket line. Bill Maher, Kennedy Center's being boycotted by real artists. Bill Maher and Netflix, champions of free speech, by the way, right? Netflix, anything goes, free speech. We're all about free speech. Bill Maher is all about free speech. Netflix, you want to trash the transgender community, Dave Chappelle? You're welcome here on Netflix because we're all about freedom of speech. And yet, they'll cross a boycott line and take a Mark Twain Prize and then celebrate it on Netflix, take it from a man who right now is arresting people not just for what they say, but for what they think. Thought crimes. But tell me again, Bill Maher, tell me again, Netflix, what champions of the First Amendment you are. Shame on you if you were capable of any. Well, back to Antifa. What if Antifa, besides now being labeled a domestic terrorist organization, what if they were also labeled an international terrorist organization? Well, then the president would have at his disposal an entire suite of federal law enforcement agents to arrest, detain, and even send off to dark sites for interrogation in places like Jordan or Gitmo. You're part of an international terrorism ring, like Al-Qaeda. Well, certainly Marco Rubio wouldn't designate Antifa a foreign terrorist organization. Yeah, he did. In November, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, designated Antifa a foreign terrorist organization. which means Trump can now order airstrikes on their boats. That's what he did with Nicaragua, narco-terrorists. If you hold beliefs that Antifa, which doesn't exist, if you hold beliefs that smell like Antifa, meaning if you oppose fascism, you open yourself up to a host of indictments, possibly treason, because you're now coordinating with an international terrorist organization in the same league as Al-Qaeda or Nicaragua. Because Congress keeps renewing the 2021 authorization to fight a global war on terrorism, right after 9/11, Bush got an authorization not to attack Afghanistan because they didn't attack us on 9/11. So he went and got a authorization to fight a global war on terrorism in 2021, and Congress keeps renewing it. A president can designate anyone a foreign terrorist and use our military to dispose of those people. And you know what's going on in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific with these narco-terrorists who we know are not narco-terrorists. These are extrajudicial killing. And all Trump and Hegseth have to say is they're terrorists. They're domestic terrorists. Again, Hitler never broke the law. And there's something else we should keep in mind heading into the midterms. Stop thinking about Nazi Germany. Fascism succeeds. Stop thinking of Italy, stop thinking of Mussolini and Hitler. Think of Franco. Think of Spain. Fascism lasted a long time in Spain. The Spanish Civil War was before Pearl Harbor, and Franco didn't die until what, 75? 76? I think it was 75. Fascism works. Not for you and me, but it works. Fascism lasted a long time in Spain. It's lasted very long in the 20th century and sometimes during the 21st century in Central and South America. Stop thinking about the Holocaust and the Nazis. Fascism works. Fascism succeeds. It's a choice. It's an alternative to democracy. Countries, especially in Central and South America, go through fascistic phases. Fascism ebbs and flows depending on what America wants. There's been a lot of fascism, Somoza in Nicaragua. There's been a lot of fascism in Central and South America, depending on what America wants. Henry Kissinger wanted fascism in Chile. So what? He looked the other way when Allende was killed, and they installed Pinochet. And the Chicago boys, the Chicago School of Economics, took over. Fascism, it works. It's a choice. It's an alternative. And America has made it a choice and an alternative throughout Central and South America. So stop thinking Hitler. Think Franco in Spain, Pinochet in Chile. Think of the 34 years of Stroessner in Paraguay, Vargas in Brazil, Bolsonaro, if Lula didn't beat him, Argentina's military junta, Somoza. Fascism is built to last. And it can also go away and then it can come back. It can happen here. It has happened here. If you're not an American citizen, it's not going to be Nazi Germany, because Nazi Germany is sine qua non. That, it could be, we could rack up the same numbers as Nazi Germany, but it's not going to be Nazi Germany. It's going to be something different. Maybe as horrific. Fascism is a choice. It works, and there are fascists in America who want everything fascism has to offer except the name fascism. We could be looking at nearly 17 years of what Chile went through under Pinochet. A brutal dictatorship, but not for everybody. Right? Under Pinochet, under Franco, under Stroessner, under Somoza, a lot of people went on with their lives. Not everybody, just enough. So, this is a police state. It's a fascist state. For anyone in this country who is not a U.S. citizen, and then it's just a small leap for it to become a fascistic state for some American citizens. And there's a number. They have a number. 100 million. They've said it. Greg Bovino has said it. 100 million citizens don't belong in the United States. That's the plan. Now, they don't say it right now. There are a lot of things they don't say right now. The Department of Homeland Security under Kristi Noem was very open about this. 100 million, that's the number. There were tweets showing a beautiful beach. This was from the Department of Homeland Security under Kristi Noem. Beautiful beach. And it says, this is what America looks like without 100 million. That's the plan. Donald Trump, in his speeches, has repeatedly said the threat to America is not some foreign government. The threat is the enemy within. J.D. Vance, in his new book, I think it's called Communion. I think it's Communion. He says that. J.D. Vance was against the war in Iran. He opposes foreign wars because he believes the war is at home. No foreign wars. He wants domestic wars against, and he puts this into writing in his book, against people who don't believe America is a Christian nation. He put that into writing in his book. He says in his book, you can be like my wife and not convert to Christianity. He said, I wish you would, but you don't have to convert to Christianity. In his book, he says, but if you don't believe our nation is founded on and will only survive by applying Christian values, you are the enemy from within. That's what he writes. That's what J.D. Vance believes. You don't have to convert to Christianity, but you have to believe in Christian values. You have to believe that America was founded as a Christian nation. And he writes about his ancestors visiting a grave and how these are the people who own America. That America is not an idea. It's people who've been here for the longest period. It's a very specific culture with very specific Christian beliefs. That's who J.D. Vance is, and that's who has taken over the Republican Party, and that is a blueprint for where we're heading unless you vote in the midterms and take control of the House or the Senate. Christian values. Only problem with that is, what exactly are Christian values? Well, whatever isn't Antifa. Whatever isn't Antifa is Christian values. Yesterday, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, announced a meeting of 60 foreign ministers next week. They're going to convene in Washington and help Donald Trump fight this imaginary enemy, Antifa. Now, it was a joke. Antifa was a joke. We all know it doesn't exist. It's a belief system. But the global war on terrorism is also a joke, because you cannot fight a war on a method. Terrorism is a method. How do you fight a global war on a method? Terrorism is a method. It's not a belief system. Anybody can be called a terrorist. So you're fighting a global war on terrorism, which means nothing, against Antifa, which doesn't exist. It's perfect. The enemy can be whatever you want it to be. The Washington Post reporting today that internal documents suggest the White House, through its counterterrorism czar, Sebastian Gorka, Google Sam Cedar, Sebastian Gorka, and he'll just, everything Sam has been warning against Sebastian Gorka for years. Sebastian Gorka is our counterterrorism czar, and he's attempting to create a narrative that there is an international threat in this country from far-left terrorists, which would then make it possible, what? For our State Department to link Antifa, which is already designated a foreign terrorist organization. If you can get cooperation from several countries, you can then link Antifa to every other far-left, quote-unquote, terrorist organization around the world. Problem is, these far-left terrorist organizations don't exist. They existed in the 60s and the 70s, the Weather Underground, but it's not a problem. What they're trying to do is they're creating a problem because they want the solution, which is to expand Donald Trump's powers, allow him to authorize domestic law enforcement to crack down on left-wing groups, progressive groups in America, crack down on anybody with ties to left-wing groups, anybody who says something like Antifa doesn't exist and my father fought in World War II, he was Antifa. They are creating a very solid legal foundation to try and convict left-wing politicians and voters, accusing them of aiding and abetting international terrorists. Treason. That's what they called communists in the 50s. It was treason. You can't outlaw what somebody thinks, but you can. As I said, in September of last year, Trump signed an executive order officially labeling Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. It's now a world terrorist organization. There is no Antifa. There is no leader, no members. Nobody belongs to Antifa. It is a belief, the way terrorism is a method. It's a belief. You can't wage war on terrorism. You can't wage war on a method, and you can't wage war on an idea. But it's perfect for Trump because if Antifa doesn't exist, it gets to be whatever he wants it to be. If you want to arrest the mastermind behind Antifa, I think you have to arrest Trump. I think he's the only one trying to convince people that Antifa is a real thing. It doesn't exist. And Europe knows that. You know, Marco Rubio is holding the summit next week, 60 some odd foreign ministers to meet on how to combat Antifa. Well, most of them already have expressed no interest in showing up. They don't think it's a problem. The Washington Post reporting that the State Department hosted a meeting of foreign countries in May. They held it at The Hague, where Marco Rubio and Donald Trump should be living right now. But the State Department hosted a meeting of foreign countries at The Hague in May to address the rising threat from far-left terrorism. And that meeting, according to the Washington Post, was a dud due to it being so sparsely attended. You're listening to The Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for joining me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. Please share it. Go to my website. Sign up for my newsletter. I don't want to inundate you with garbage in your inbox, but if you want to hear from me more often, we have a fan club. Go to davidfeldmanshow.com and click on the sign up for my fan club, and that tells you I will include you in if I'm taking a vacation so you don't have to worry about me, or if we're having a special recording session, I can invite you. If you want to, we're going to be doing interviews for the audio podcast over the weekend, so join the fan club if you want to be notified. There's the newsletter, which is infrequent, but if you want to more stuff in your box, join the fan club, and you'll get pictures of me shirtless. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Here's the latest on the war with Iran. We're done. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. I'll get to the war with Iran on the next show. Not going to talk about McConnell. You can hear about McConnell elsewhere. You can hear about Graham Plattner. I've covered all of that. This is what I think is really important, and I know people don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I know. But at least you can't say you haven't been warned. Could I be any more self-serving than that and self-righteous? But got to get out and vote for the Democratic Party. As bad as Schumer and Jeffries are, you got to get at whoever, there is somebody who should replace Plattner, whoever it is, the Democrats have to control the Senate. So thank you for listening. I will see everybody live Sunday at 6:05 p.m. and go to davidfeldmanshow.com and join my fan club. Bye.